you've really got to do a deep dive in your market. That research, if you're new to your niche that you want to serve, is super important. The ideal scenario is you're very, very, very familiar with the niche market you want to serve. Start with something that you are incredibly knowledgeable about, passionate about, or willing to do a ton of research on, or a good amount of research on, to really understand the dynamics at play.
There's a first principle, which is you have to add value to the marketplace. If you put a Me Too product out there, even though it costs you a lot of sweat and time and money to put it out there, you haven't added any value because you're just putting more of the same out there. So you'll get paid the same, which means no profit.
You're listening to Ecomonics, a Debutify podcast, your resource for one-of-a-kind insights into the world of e-commerce and business in the modern age. This is Joseph. I'll be presenting a wealth of industry knowledge from interviews with successful business people and our own state-of-the-art research. Your time is valuable, so let's go. Michael Veazy and Jason Miles. This is an Ecomonics First. I have two people as guests on the program today, so this is exciting. How you guys doing? How you feeling today? We'll start with you, Michael.
Feeling very well, yes, thanks. Over in, for once, sunny London. And really, really looking forward to deep diving into economic principles. Absolutely love this stuff. So looking forward to the show.
Oh, man, I'm jealous. I'm in rainy Seattle, so I'm doing well as well. So thanks for asking.
I'm over here in Toronto, Canada. We had about 5 minutes of really nice weather, and that's been sustaining us all the way through until the next 5 minutes we have in June. So it's enough. A little goes a long way up here in the Great White North.
Sounds like London weather, to be honest.
This is a tangent, but I'll tell you very, very quickly. I worked for a watch company, and we sold internationally, and a great deal of our customer base was in the UK. And so I would start my shift at 10 a.m. and the day was already partway through in the UK. So I would get calls from UK customers being like, "It's been 5 hours and I haven't gotten my watch." And then we had other people who would call, and the FedEx delivery driver he took the package and he put it out by their porch. So I get a call saying, "I live in London, right? It is raining all the time. My package is completely decimated."
Pretty good work on the accent, by the way.
Thanks. I've had a lot of practice on that. And there goes my pen. So while I pick that up, why don't I start you guys off with the big economics traditional question, which is who you guys are and what you guys do. And this time we'll start with you, Jason.
Sure. Honored to be here, by the way. And
Honored to have you.
I've been selling online for, I guess, 13, 14 years now. We started on eBay. My wife and I did. It was a kitchen table enterprise. I was full-time nonprofit manager, and it did a nonprofit management career for 20 years as my full-time employment. We good?
No, I was just remarking. 20 years. That's
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I have a bit of a quirky career path. I'm very, very happy with this job right now, but I would need to pass the 2-year threshold for it to be the longest job that I've held down at any point in my life.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm slow to stuff. So I did 20 years in nonprofit management. My wife and I built a e-commerce business first on eBay, and then migrated it to ultimately Shopify in 2013. And it's called Pixie Fair. It's in the sewing niche. We have a marketplace basically with sewing patterns. I have a catalog of about 3,100 products on our Shopify site. I think we're at 2.6 million transactions now through our store, and I had a great time doing it. I retired from my 9-to-5 job in 2014, and then about 3 years ago, I started doing coaching, consulting, and book writing, which is sort of my side hustle on life. And so that's me. Yeah.
And Michael, yourself?
So I, as you know, live in London, England. Like yourself, I think probably the maximum I've ever worked in a job was about 2 years until I, did the whole e-commerce thing. So some people call that a serial entrepreneur. I think I was just kind of trying to find the right path, I guess. So I work with 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers who are struggling to scale, particularly focused on sales-related issues. So the easy wins optimization, which is surprisingly neglected, even though it kind of feels, if you're in the midst of it, like everyone's perfect at it. In fact, implementing it at scale can be tricky. And the primary mechanism for that is deep focused mastermind. So really, I'm focused on consulting these days. I have sold on Amazon. I have a little bit of a finger in the pies there. I personally realized a while ago that, frankly, my passion is for business in the more abstract sense. And whilst I keep my finger on the pulse by doing daily management work for some clients on Amazon, that's really where my passion is, the strategic level, because I think it's just underused by entrepreneurs. So that's my sort of focus and passion.
Mhm. You wrote down easy wins optimization, and I'm gonna table that because that is something that I would like to get your take on afterwards. But we have a really important subject that we wanted to make sure that we got to, and I want to know for certain that when I'm done this recording, that I've devoted as much time to it as is warranted by the context. Um, if we have time afterwards, I also want to hear about how you guys got into working on your program together, but we'll get to that. So here we go. We're going to talk about economics principles. I've been lucky to have quite a few conversations up to this point, and so my gut tells me that a lot of what we refer to as economics principles has been brought up, but I don't think it's been characterized in this particular way. So here's my first understanding of it. I think the more we connect to the fundamentals of commerce, especially when we compare it to the ever-evolving e-commerce marketplace, the better off we are. Because I think there's a lot of a lot of allure to the digital side of things can happen very rapidly, and then all of a sudden somebody can make a lot of money. And what they're missing are some of those key principles that people have to keep in mind just to run any good business, regardless of if it takes place online or if you're mowing people's lawns, whatever the case is. So that's my first initial understanding of economics principles. But I leave it to you now to, I guess, put me on align me on the correct path. So who wants to go first? I'm not sure who I should ask first about this. All right,
Yeah,
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to just give the kickoff overview of this. You know, it really started into my mind with watching some interviews that Elon Musk did about rockets and, you know, all of the amazing things he does. And he kept referring back to first principles. You know, he'd say this phrase like, you know, well, we want to take things all the way back to first principles in engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought to myself, man, it's so great that Elon Musk can have first principles in space rocket stuff. I wish there were some first principles in e-commerce. And I was like, wait, there have to be first principles in e-commerce. Like, what am I talking about? So I really just started this mind kind of, you know, this journey of what are the basis, you know, kind of core concepts that we're all depending on as e-commerce sellers. And of course, it's not surprising when you think it through. It's microeconomics and psychology. And so Michael and I, for our podcast work, we just started making a list of what we are calling e-commerce first principles, and then started devoting podcast episodes to them. And I don't know, we've done 5 or 6 or 7 now, but the list of e-commerce first principles that we brainstormed together was like over 30 discrete topics. And they're very fascinating when you go back and you look at, okay, what does the microeconomic literature talk about, and how do we apply that to our individual Shopify sites or Amazon accounts, or you know, our online selling efforts. And so that was sort of the origin of the idea.
Just want to add as a follow-up to that, Jeff Bezos is obviously got a physics degree, and the richest 2 people in the world right now, your favorite person, Elon Musk, who I also have, you know, just to disclose, I have some shares in Tesla in case, but that's not really why I'm saying it, and obviously sell on Amazon, so maybe I could be said to be biased, but the richest 2 people in the world have physics degrees. I don't think that's a coincidence. They talked about the triumph of the nerds back in the sort of early 2000s, but I think it's only really just beginning to really show up in the big level now. A couple of other things that make me think about first principles and how that ties in with Jeff Bezos and the genius that he's created with Amazon. Love or hate him, he is a genius operator. He had a 10-year Wall Street investment background. He wasn't just an operator, he was really, really good. And I think that's another part of the first principles that he's applied at Amazon and that we need to apply as e-commerce operators. And the final thing about Jeff Bezos, fascinating thing, is that he was sent to a special school. Now, normally in the UK, special needs means that you struggle. You have, you're behind the usual curve of educational development. He's actually, was exceptionally gifted, and he was put through a very special system, I believe, the state school system, or public schools, as you would say in the US. And one of the things that stuck from that is really being trained to think in a lateral but very first principles based way. So famously, people have jumped in a town car with Jeff Bezos to be sort of interviewed on the way to the headquarters, the S-level people, and he'll say something like, quickly, how many manhole covers are in the USA? And you've got 2 minutes to try and figure out a way to solve that kind of unsolvable problem. So I think that this kind of thinking is there at the top already, not just Elon Musk, but with Jeff Bezos as well.
I'm going to throw one more into the Jeff Bezos mix too, is that Amazon took some time before it was profitable. I believe it actually reported its first profit in like 2014. It's been a while since I looked at that fact. So you have to imagine this long-term thinking where he understands that this can't be profitable right away. He's going to have to continuously reinvest into the business until it gets to that profitability point. And even so, the margins of it aren't as disparate as you might think. A lot of their ability to be successful is the fact that they don't have especially when you come to the products themselves, you don't make too much money off of that, but you do start to make a lot more money once you start adding in digital and you start adding in AWS. And so you can change the margins on that quite a bit.
I love that. Let me just mention before we move past this point, the idea of applying first principles thinking is very it's a well-worn path. So you can research how to do this, but the 3 principles involved in applying first principles thinking are: identify your current assumptions about whatever you're working on. For us, it's always our e-commerce selling and efforts and some specific aspect of it. And then the second principle is break down the problem into its fundamental principles, the most core concepts associated. And then the third step is to create new solutions. And that's applying first principles thinking. I would just encourage all the e-commerce sellers listening to this show to go down that path. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Jason's, by the way, got a real knack for breaking the complex into the simple. And I think that's very good, because I have a tendency to want to go down a rabbit hole and go into detail. So we balance each other out on the podcast.
Yeah, totally.
Just one thing I want to say about Jeff Bezos and the whole profit thing. Now, I am not a sophisticated Wall Street trained analyst, but my understanding of what made Amazon great is, I guess there's 2 things: one intangible, one very tangible, but kind of hidden if you look at it the wrong way. Talking about identifying current assumptions. The assumption that profit drives value is normal for most businesses, right? Small or big. But the thing about Amazon is Jeff Bezos says, first of all, he famously thinks in 7-year chunks where everyone else thinks about the last quarter. That's one of the things. The second genius he's had is to convince the Wall Street guys that they should keep investing in a company that keeps putting off profit for like 15 or 20 years pretty much, which is just crazy. But the third thing is that I actually don't think it's run for profit. I think it's about cash flow, and their cash conversion cycle is actually negative, meaning they get paid 14 days before they pay anyone else. I think that's really a piece of genius that everyone misses. The other genius, though, is this: when you get profit, you get taxed on that. When tax is your biggest expense, that slows down growth. And for a guy who's obsessed with growth and who was selling that explicitly to Wall Street, I think that's the key. That it was all about let's grow, which is a kind of a PLC luxury that is a crazy obsession that doesn't work for a privately held business to go broke. But secondly, how do you grow? Okay, you reinvest everything. How do you do that? Don't get taxed because it's your biggest expense. Apart from the way he's played the states off against each other for 20 years, eventually they've applied sales tax, but that took him 2 decades. So there's a lot behind that single statement around the profit, in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine so. At least 1 7-year chunk worth of it, if not more than that. So I did listen to I thought it was just 2 parts, but apparently there was more parts to it, and it reminded me of something from my own personal experience that I think I can apply here. So part of my hobby profile is that I do like playing games competitively, and I've been playing video games since I was very young. And when I started playing when I was very young, I was left to figure things out on my own, develop my own skills on my own. I didn't have the internet to have any guides or anything like that. And I would join the game community, and a lot of the younger players, initially they would have the internet to act as a guide, so they can tell them, here's some tricks, tips, here's combos, here's stuff like that. And what I noticed is my fundamentals were stronger. I didn't understand a lot of like the the particular strategies that people on the internet were coming up with, but I understood things on a very core level, and that to me, I think, has been something that I think might be missing when a lot of people get into e-commerce, is that they don't start with the fundamentals. They just start with the guide to reach success, and it doesn't occur to them why these things actually are successful. And I don't want to like point to any one particular YouTube channel and saying they're forgetting to say the fundamentals. I would imagine, and for the most part, they do describe them, but they don't hone in on them. And so, what I want to hear is your experience in this, and perhaps with your own e-commerce development. Is at what point did the fundamentals come in, and or did the fundamentals come first, or did you feel like the fundamentals came a little bit later?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And it's a great
Thank you.
observation. And I think you're totally right. That's how a lot of online sellers do approach the exercises. They come into it with um, a sliver of understanding about how to execute on maybe a part of a business model or a business model. They get training. They hear about some amazing thing. We call those shiny objects, like, oh, merch or whatever it is, retail arbitrage or whatever the new thing is they've heard about. But when I work with coaching clients, one comes to my mind who was just a grinder in their industry for 25, 30 years and never made that much money. And then they develop a product associated with what they did for their industry. And they are now happily selling millions and millions and millions of dollars a year of this simple product. But they spent 30 years knowing their customer. They spent 30 years knowing what doesn't work. They spent 30 years knowing how to describe the terms and the wording choices and all of that in their industry. And so, their transition to e-commerce was not complicated. It was not about technology. They just absolutely destroy it because they knew who they were serving and they knew that the product need existed. So I think those kinds of examples are very, very common for all of us. When we see people really crush it and pull back the covers, you'll see, oh, they've had experience in this industry, or they've had good solid business training before, or they failed a few times and learned through the school of hard knocks. And those lessons are how we all learn our first principles, our basics. It's the basic karate chop we all have to learn how to get stuff done. Yeah.
I think to also to your point, Joseph, around you've got your 10 steps or 12 modules or whatever to success. Now, having tried to create or having created a rather monstrous course for people starting from the beginning, which is no longer the people that I really serve because it's very hard to help people starting. But one of the troubles that I understand and sympathize with is when you're trying to teach people something from scratch, you need to keep it simple. But here's the thing I would say, that what I love about your approach, Jason, and you just given a great example of you break things down to very simple things. Okay, how do you get first principles, identify current assumptions, break down the problem into fundamental principles, create new solutions. Now that is very simple looking, but it's a simple truth because there's some quote by a great American whose name escapes me, but it's something like the man who follows practices is not going to succeed, and the man who follows principles is always going to, or something like that's not the right quote. I don't know who it is, Jefferson or somebody along those lines. And the point is this, that if you are working from first principles, the practices you create from that will be on a solid ground. So if you ignore the laws of physics, it goes wrong. And there are certain laws of business, it turns out, and I think Jason and I really share this passion for this, that we were talking about this a few weeks ago, and we both turned out we were both doing the same kind of nerding about this stuff. And the reason that I'm passionate about it is because exactly that thing, that it's really hard to simplify things, but it can be done if you're very mindful. But as you said, Jason, and I like that sort of reality check, is that a lot of it comes from the school of hard knocks, and nobody wants to sell that in a course either because that's really unpalatable. But I think it's the truth.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. So when Jason mentioned the karate chop, it did remind me of the Karate Kid, because in the movie, and this is, I think, the single most important lesson that comes from that movie is that he thinks he's being trained, and he's being trained, but he doesn't realize it. He's just doing unconscious muscle memory, and he is just painting fences, and he's sanding floors, and he's waxing, and he gets frustrated, and understandably so, because the the ultimate lesson is not being revealed to him yet. And I also suspect that there has to be that moment of doubt in order for something to properly sink in. Like if I'm 100% committed to something and I'm completely devoted and there's no skepticism whatsoever, it doesn't give me the ability to then open my mind up in such a way that the real lesson comes in. Like you have to reach a low before you can reach a high. And so I imagine that a lot of people that have come to speak to you guys have had those issues. Like you're saying, the school of hard knocks, people have they failed numerous times before they finally understand it. And I guess the way I would like to ask this as a question is, what would be what's the right way to fail? Like how do we fail correctly, and how do we really understand the lessons so that we don't keep failing again in the same way?
So often and quickly, I guess, is the answer. I always like this part of Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, where he was being interviewed by a reporter, and her basic gist of her interview went along these lines. She said something like, 80% of businesses fail, and you suggest people start a business. Why is that a good plan? Why aren't you just setting them up for failure? And he said, who cares? His response was, who cares? And she's like, what do you mean, who cares? All those people, they'll fail. And he says, if my business fails, I'll start another one. And if that one fails, I'll start another one. And he said, it doesn't matter. You can fail in business as many times as you need to before you figure out how to do it right. And then you get all the benefits of business. And I love that thinking. It's just like, ideally none of us would fail at all. We would just hit a home run first time up to the plate, but that's not reality. A lot of times we fail. Or what most likely happens is we'll implement a business model and we'll realize the downsides of that business model. So we got it working, but then we realize, hey, this is just sort of like a little, two-stroke engine that puts out like 3 horsepower. This is not going to get me to 200 miles an hour type thing, to use a car metaphor. And so you just start looking for a better business model.
I'd just add to that as well. It may be a sort of more moderate version of that. Whilst I agree entirely with what you're saying about Robert Kiyosaki's quote, he does say in Rich Dad Poor Dad, if I remember, that it's better to fail before the age of 30, which puts me almost 2 decades beyond that age. So if you're slightly less risk on than that, then a less nuclear version is Jim Collins' principle from Good to Great, Great by Choice. Great by Choice, by the way, is the book to read if you're in a higher risk, high reward kind of area, like a more unstable environment, like most internet-based businesses move so fast and the environment moves so fast. And his principle is fire bullets, then fire cannonballs. And he references like an 18th century British sea battle where you make sure you fire the bullet and you use a certain amount of gunpowder and metal, but you're not on the aim yet, and then you try again, and then once you got it in the right aim, then you put your big amount of gunpowder and your few but really impactful cannonballs. And to me, that really makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a less nuclear version. Another way of putting it is simply just try and make sure that any failures you have won't bankrupt you personally and or your business. And the line is not that distinct, because frankly, if you're borrowing more than a certain amount of money, it tends to be with personal loans, and then your house is at stake. So I would say that's a less extreme version, but that's also kind of micro failures. That's when they analyzed businesses that were working in very, very difficult environments, like the airline industry, Microsoft versus Apple back in their comparison point. And that was a consistent theme as well.
One particular point that I want to raise is just the metric of try to have your failures before 30. And what I find about age-based instructions or advice like that is that as generations continue to unfold, I think the metrics do change. I'm 30 right now, and I've only just moved into an apartment. Once a few generations prior to that, people were consistently moving into apartments or even buying homes much sooner in their lives, because I think it was a simpler time economically. And so what I think is that we can look at it as age, and age will eventually become a significant factor. But I think it has a lot to do with what personal milestones a person has passed. Like for one, is
Yeah.
somebody else depending on me? Like, do I have a child to raise, or have my parents gotten to the point where I now have to be more responsible for them? Okay, now I have other people that I'm accountable to. Now it's much more difficult to fail, because now the failure will not only affect me, it will affect other people. So I tend to look at it that way, but maybe that's the little bit of youth I have left, I guess, the little optimism I have left for the future.
Sure. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what you just said is the dependency. I think it really comes down to what is the responsible yet courageous act given any person's personal situation. I guess the age thing, what he really probably means is you got the energy to pick yourself up and fail again, and you don't have kids yet who are depending on you for a wage. Having said that, traditionally, as you said, back in the day, everyone had kids at 18. I think Robert Kiyosaki did have kids, and he did sort of famously say, I think it was maybe Kiyosaki and other people who said it, like some people say, oh, I can't take a risk because I got kids. And to which his response is, I'm going to take a risk because I got kids, because I want to build a future for them. So it does come down to, as you said, the relationship to these things rather than just the things themselves, really.
So what I want to do is take this knowledge so far and see if we can develop a brief but ideal guide frame for my audience. Many of whom are either doing Shopify stores, or they're just waiting for the last little nugget of inspiration before they get into it. So with applying the principles, how would somebody correctly, or as much as possible, there's still plenty of lessons to learn, set up a Shopify store, pick a product in their niche, and get started in competing in the marketplace?
Yeah. Well, the microeconomic principles associated with what you just described, obviously, supply and demand is the most central theme in microeconomics. And so picking a product is really a tricky one. Now, for our personal story, for example, when we started on eBay selling, we did auctions of handmade doll clothes. Now, for those of you who are uninformed about the wide world of doll clothes, there is actually a market, and people actually pay a lot of money. So we could auction my wife's handmade items for $300, $400, $500. But and so there was a market for that. But the problem was she had to take a week or two or more to make the thing, and so we had an obvious market, but the supply was the problem. And so back in 2009, we shifted to publishing her patterns as digitally downloadable files, PDF files. And we were experimenting whether there was a market for that. And as it happens, there's a huge market for sewing patterns. And so that was the shift we made in 2009. And that really set the course of our, the next 12 years or whatever it's been. So, I think, but the interesting point is this: Amazon didn't allow for selling PDF files. eBay didn't allow for selling PDF files. So if you looked on those marketplaces, you would see zero for supply or demand, because they literally, by their terms of service, didn't permit it. So you've really got to do a deep dive in your market that you want to serve, really understand what is and isn't available, why it's not available in certain places, and look for opportunity there. And that's that research, if you're new to your niche that you want to serve, is super important. Now, the ideal scenario is you're very, very, very familiar with the niche market you want to serve, so that you know these things, and so that the supply side and the demand side is something you can wrap your mind around really, really quickly and find opportunity. And you don't find that by going to Alibaba and just randomly looking around for stupid stuff. You don't find it by just seeing what other people are doing successfully on Amazon and then doing a Me Too version of reality. And so you've got to take a more thorough approach to it than that. And so I guess that's sort of my advice for somebody who's just getting into it: is start with something that you are incredibly knowledgeable about, passionate about, or willing to do a ton of research on, or a good amount of research on, to really understand the dynamics at play.
Totally agree with everything Jason said. I would just add to the supply and demand thing a couple of nuances. I mean, first of all, just echo what you were saying, that I've had a couple of clients recently just getting started from scratch on Amazon with a kind of private label / unique product play. One of whom, within about a month, decided what he was going to sell, because he's a passionate consumer of a certain type of product and he has a lot of friends who will do the same thing. Another guy, frankly, I'm about to say to him, I think we should stop working together because I don't want to waste your money, because he's been going around in circles for 6 months because he doesn't seem to have any particular passion for a particular thing or know anybody. And when I suggest to him that he talks to actual real people about the problems they're having, he's very resistant, which I get because it's hassle and you're bothering people. But the trouble is that it's really hard to develop a great product without talking to people, because people are the ones who pay us at the other end of the system. Another way of putting it is every single thing in the system is a cost except for the consumer. So if you don't know them and you don't respect their needs, then you're already off target at the beginning. So, it's pretty simple, but that whole let's go on Jungle Scout thing is just a disaster. Please, I beg somebody, if there's nothing else you take away, if you're going to sell on Amazon, please don't just go on Jungle Scout, because everyone else does it, including the Chinese factories, and they do it in small scale. Chinese factories don't do things at that scale. They'll send 400 employees to a training day on how to hack Jungle Scout with the black as a black hat. So that's not the way to go. A more positive note, I absolutely am passionately in love with the STAR principle, which is Richard Koch's big thing. And it's basically a reiteration of the Boston Consulting Group matrix, which came back from the 60s. And it simply means that you need to be in a fast growth market and be able to be the leader in the market, i.e. have at least twice the revenue of your nearest competitor. Most markets will not lend themselves to that. And if you have a Venn diagram overlap of I really know and care about this market, and I know people I can go and hassle and give my prototypes to and say, what do you think? And it's hits the STAR principle, that's not going to be much left, but what's left is really promising hunting grounds.
Let me just add one tiny little bit, and then we'll keep going. But I think the solution to a lot of this problem is people try to overserve too big a market. They try to serve too big a market. I always encourage people, go smaller, go into a sub niche, go into a sub niche of a sub niche, go into a market that is so darn boring. No one is interested in being a successful marketer in that space because it's just too niche. And that's, I think, part of the solution is really getting into something that is where you can actually be the dominant player in a very, very small space. And that's just a general principle that I think is very effective for a lot of people. Yeah.
There was one question that I wanted to ask you earlier. There's one thing I was interested in knowing about with the clothing for dolls, which was, I had always thought that if I'm making something that takes a lot more labor and it's more of I was thinking like more of like a boutique or more of a premium. There's a very specific word that I would want to use for it, but I can't find it right now. So I'll just move on from that. But I had figured that what you're doing in order to make sure that it's worth the time is that you would increase the cost to reflect how much time it takes to make something. So at the very least compensated for hours worked. So what I was wondering is, was there a limit to how much people were willing to pay, but it didn't reflect the amount of time it took to continue making the material?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, there are one-off doll clothes custom designers and makers who have sold items into the thousands of dollars. And it's so the top end is TBD. I guess it depends on who makes it and who's the customer. You think about literally British royalty who has a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old daughter. What would they pay for a custom toy for their daughter, or Hollywood celebrities? The price is not the issue. So, but that doesn't mean that on the supply side, it makes the system of making it any more simple. So for all those reasons, we thought, we would rather pivot out of it into digital goods, which has amazing properties, near zero marginal cost, being the most powerful concept for digital goods. So that was our choice back in 2009, and it's served us really well. Yeah.
I do have to wonder, and not just with royalty in the UK, but royalty in general, is if the princess would have a doll, or if she would just be allowed to like hire human beings to play the role of the dolls instead. And just,
I'm pretty sure they have dolls, but I
Okay.
just a guess.
If I had to choose, guys,
No,
since you're
yeah.
mentioning British royalty, I would definitely go for celebrities. They seem to spend very freely and very unwisely. The British royalty's always got the media looking at them, and they're actually kind of quite sensible in a weird kind of way, if having £1 billion palace can be said to be sensible. So I would sell to the celebrities, just
Yeah.
so you know.
Yeah, I wanted to expand the question now because I didn't want to go after the the UK royalty in specific. So Michael, I got a question for you with the with your client who you're on the verge of letting go. It sounds like your client is missing some key motivation or some key understanding that is uh, costing him his ability to do something significant in the space. And everybody that I talk to, even if somebody is, let's just say, they drop ship something that is beneficial but not exactly world breaking, they still want to contribute to the net good with their content. They still want to help other people, because you never know who you're helping. Some people can really use this this market to get out of a rut. And I've talked to people who use this to get out of ruts, and they've improved their lives, they've helped their parents out, and it's inspirational. It sounds to me, and I'm not an expert on this is just the best that I can do under the circumstances, that he's missing the motivation to do something good for other people. Like, he's missing the motivation to do favors. Am I close? Is there, like, what is his motivation to get into e-commerce in the first place?
That's a very good question. I
Thank you.
guess really I would say that for me, this is more about coaching than e-commerce, but it's kind of the same thing. It comes to the motivation question and who should be doing this and who shouldn't. And I don't get to decide who should and shouldn't do things with their life. It would be incredibly arrogant of me. But what I do know is who I believe will succeed in a business model based on my experience, and who I think I can help, which is a much narrower and easier question. And I think for me, it's kind of a failure as a coach slash as an educator to not have put across somehow through the hundreds and hundreds of podcast episodes I've done for newbies on Amazon, which I'm now stepping away from. I somehow haven't got across the fact that you really need to care about something. And I've tried to do that. I've had guests on who talked about it. I've had guests who've built and sold businesses who clearly care about that stuff, like Ben Leonard, who I've had on recently, who sold a 7-figure business within 2.5 years of creating it. Why? Because he was very, very passionate about the area. I think partly luck, partly timing. And somehow I haven't communicated that. So that was an educational fail. And I also didn't, as a coach, manage to filter him out through the application and interview process and say, maybe you're not the right person for this. To be fair, it's one of those things you can't really find out whether something's for you or not, to Jason's point earlier, without the school of hard knocks. The school of hard knocks of not even starting is even a school of not so much hard knocks as just boredom and frustration and going around in circles looking at spreadsheets all day. That's kind of been part of my experience of entrepreneurship as well, is that going in circles in the wilderness for years. Jason, I know you've had your version of that. So
Yeah.
maybe he had to try this for 6 months on paper to discover it wasn't for him. And that's maybe okay, man. That's a use of time that was valid.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in on that a little bit. I spent 10 years not knowing what to sell online. I heard about a guy making $1,000 a day in 1998 on the internet. He had a traffic school website he had set up, and it was one of the first traffic school websites on the internet. And I talked to him. He needed data entry help for a couple hours a week, and I didn't work with him. But the idea of $1,000 a day on the internet just was like baked into my brain. Well, for 10 years, I poked around in the evenings and weekends trying to understand what to do, how to do it. I made no progress. But ultimately what happened was I saw my wife doing something at such extraordinary level that I thought there's an opportunity to be the marketer for her. And so I would just suggest to anybody who's in a stuck position like that just literally cannot think of something. Maybe they're a brilliant technical marketer, but they're not a product creator. So I would encourage them to go find a partner, or go be a marketer for somebody else's product and serve them for a couple years and learn through their passion for an industry, for a niche, for a customer, because you don't know why they're not succeeding. Like, for that 10-year period, I have an MBA. I wanted to do it. I was interested in the topic. I just literally couldn't think of a product to take to market. And so, there's a million reasons why it won't work sometimes, but I think the kernel of the idea is that a confused mind always says no or goes slow. And if you have somebody going super slow, they're confused, and you have to figure out how to help them get unconfused without judgment. Without psychoanalyzing. None of us are psychologists, but I think, sometimes having a collaborator or a partner is a great tool to help people go forward.
And just on that point, and to sort of out myself, if you like, I'm not a very product centered person. And the way that I've ended up collaborating, because my wife doesn't happen to create physical products, is to end up working. For example, I've got some clients. I've got a client who's heading for somewhere over $10 million a year in revenue, and they're very, very good at operations, and they're good at creating products and importing them, which is all mental hernia to me. I can do it, I can teach it, but I don't enjoy it. And whereas their optimization to that point is actually amazingly wide open. I looked at this stuff. They got, basically, not to reveal too much, they got a bunch of kitchen products, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of private label products, nearly all of them on just plain white backgrounds. So I'm like, dude, I could so improve the optimization of this and get you a return on the investment very straightforwardly. So now I've said that, I've got to go and implement that for 100 SKUs for her, and then learn the lessons and teach that. But that's an example of where I now own the fact that I love marketing. I love strategy above all, and I don't particularly love the process of creating physical products or importing them, and that's okay. And I've finally come to terms with that. So you don't even have to do it within your own business. In the end, what I think is fairly straightforward as a first principle, which is you have to add value to the marketplace. If you put a Me Too product out there, even though it costs you a lot of sweat and time and money to put it out there, you haven't added any value because you're just putting more of the same out there. So you'll get paid the same, which means no profit. And wherever you can add value, if you add extreme amounts of value, just do that thing, and it may not be creating a product, to your point.
Hmm. Well, even in having this conversation with the two of you, I was thinking about my own Shopify store. I didn't have one before getting into e-commerce. This podcast has been my entry into it, but after talking to so many people, it's hard not to be inspired and
Sure.
motivated
Yeah.
and a little jealous, but mostly inspired. And the product that I'm working on, and I'm happy to be open about it, is these drawers that you stick to underneath the desk so that it's adhesive, right? You pull it out, oh, I got a new drawer. And that's the product. But I mean, there's only so much passion that I have for a drawer that you can stick underneath the desk. But the real passion behind it for me is the ability to rethink my space. And how can I use every square inch, whether it's floor, wall, ceiling, or sky? How can I use this to optimize my space? And so this being a video show, I'm going to take full advantage of it, but I have numerous wall hooks all along my wall where I hang up headphones and coats. If it wasn't so far away, I would show you guys the drywall that I ripped off because I didn't know how to remove them properly. And that's the part that I am really passionate about, is I love the idea that my wall is a floor that I can't stand on. There are so many things that I can do with it if I just think creatively, if I just think outside the box. And that, I think, to me, is the fundamental and is the principle that I would want people to think about when they're selling their product too. Is like, what is the cycle? Like, what is the problem beneath the problem? What is the incentive and the inspiration that I want to leave people with to see their home in a new way?
Yeah. I love
By
that.
the way, I want to just say that I'm not passionate about creating those products, but I'm a passionate needer of those. And I'm looking around in a small flat in London, and absolutely my wall is covered. I won't do the disservice of showing it. I've put up these, for example, electrostatic whiteboards that stick to the wall, and not with adhesive. That's a genius invention, because suddenly I've got a whiteboard space. As you said, I've got walls. I don't really have any floor space. We're stacked to the gunnels, but that's something I feel passionate about, but as a consumer. So there is a matching passion for the problem, which reminds me of the phrase, love the problem. In others, people get obsessed with products. I think if you obsess about problems and really fall in love with constantly scratching that itch, that's really a key. I think you put your finger on it very well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, and not without the help of the both of you. So for that, I say thanks. I had another question. This isn't about the principles. So before I move out of that, did anybody have any final points that they wanted to raise about e-commerce principle or economics principles first, just in case there was any like key point I forgot to ask about?
No, I mean, I think it's just I would encourage everybody to go deep into that idea.
Okay.
Go study yourself.
So with the thread of like what are fundamentals beneath, I want to keep that in mind with this next question. So one of the points that you had raised on your podcast that I had listened to was about how a lot of the times markets end up as a monopoly or a duopoly. So can you just so that I don't have to like butcher it, can you just run through what was the premise here, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I think all of us probably are aware of the fact that online businesses tend to run towards winner take all situations. It happens online very, very frequently. It's like the internet wants to make winners. in product categories. And that happens because um, when you get ranked, by any sorting metric, other sorting metrics rank you, and categorize you, and it's a snowball effect. We have clients who are number one in Amazon for their key phrase or keyword, and they get a ton of traffic from off Amazon, from bloggers and people who will be like, hey, there's the six best products in this category, that category, and they all just compoundingly link to the winners. And so this whole idea of winner take all market opportunities is true, and this is the important part. It's true at every level of the internet, because the way that system works applies to the smallest of weird little niches just the same as it applies to coffee or laptops, and so I think that's just the basic of the idea. And what it means is you want to put yourself in a position to be number one in your category, even if your category is tiny, and start to learn the lessons of niche. That's a dominated niche by an industry leader, or find a niche that's not dominated and work to install yourself as the winner. Yeah.
The only thing I would say to that, and I could agree with every word you said, is that actually I think it's bigger than the internet. There was a study in the 60s, which was before ARPANET even really existed.
Sure.
And even then, they found that pretty much all markets tend towards monopoly. I think what happens on the internet is it accelerates and intensifies it. I think I see this as extremely intense on Amazon. So I think you have to respect that reality, that if there's the classic problem that people fall into, particularly when they're new, but not only then, is that you get excited by the size of a market, or the TAM, the total addressable market. That's really totally irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what you can take. And to the point of the star principle, being the number two in a market sounds like a great idea if you're making X amount of money, where X feels like a lot to you. But if you're not the dominant player, you don't get the economies of scale. You don't get to set the prices. You don't get to define if I'm selling an iPhone and I want to sell a Samsung, okay, iPhone's defined what a good smartphone equals. Now I have to be different from or better than, but I can't just be my own thing. And therefore, I think we have to respect the nature of the monopolistic nature, and therefore just stay away from most markets, quite simply.
And what a lot of people don't understand when you're not the leader in your category is that as new people come in, basically think of it like this way. If you're the market leader, your job is to grow the overall market. And when new entrants come in, they will receive an ever decreasing fraction of the total addressable market. And so even if, let's say, there's 5 players in your space right now, and you're the dominant one, the others will receive smaller fractions as you go down from the second place, third place, fourth place. But imagine if you have 100 players in your space, each of them will receive an even smaller fraction of the incremental sales that occur. And so as the market leader, even as something goes larger, which is your job to, basically promote the category or the topic, you're the de facto winner, and entrants becomes less and less appealing for entrants. The more there are, the worse their economics all get. And their marketing, their energy, their enthusiasm for the topic will accrete to you. It will roll to you as the market leader. And those dynamics are very fascinating to think through. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, the part of it that I was struck by the most was when you had then referred to that if it's not a monopoly, it ends up being a duopoly, and then you pointed out the competition between, say, Apple and everybody else, which I would say is spearheaded by Samsung. So I guess I could say Apple versus Samsung, but even that isn't telling the full story. And the reason why it stuck out to me is because while monopoly is often the result of market and commerce, I think duopoly is the result of just the human condition, or just our understanding of the universe at large. Because we can break down a number of things, some of which I won't say out loud because some are controversial, but many things can be broken down into this or that. You have light, you have dark, you have life, you have death, you have start, you have stop. So what my position is, and I wanted to hear if you guys think there's legs to this, or if you disagree, explain why, is that I think duopoly is the ideal market structure because it's the closest one to our ability to function as humans. You have 2-party systems in the United States. you have Coke versus Pepsi, you have I mean, yeah, I guess there's like the amber light, but for the most part, it's red light, it's green light.
Yeah, sure.
So I think our ability to understand things as humans is characterized by our ability to put things into this or that.
Well, the winner will always have people who hate their service or product, right? So where do those people go? Yeah, so success breeds like complainers. Like there's just going to be people who are unhappy with whatever you've done, whether it's a service or a product. And so it does set the stage for a dominant second position. From there, it breaks into a million shards, and it falls apart beyond that. Al Reese and Jack Trout did the seminal work in this regard in terms of marketing. Marketing Warfare is their book, and their basic commentary is be the category leader or create a new category. And those are your two choices. And that logic has been applied in business over and over and over again in all disciplines. And I think it's sound thinking.
To that point, I think that I'm glad you mentioned the creating a new category thing, because I think that's actually the key often for a star business. And Richard Koch, by the way, just to put why I think Richard Koch is a god amongst men, because first of all, he was a consultant, and then he retired from that in his 50s, whatever, with a few £1 million and turned that into, I think he's worth like somewhere in sort of fractional billionaire, $300 million or something from his own investments. So he followed his own advice, which is pretty rare. The second thing is, out of 16 investments you heard last, I heard 8 had a positive return. No venture capital gets close. The average good venture capitalist with experience and battle scars, 1 in 10. So the guy is a legend. And what he did, for example, his first big investment was in Betfair. And Betfair was in the gambling category. They created an online version of it. So it's not a neatly e-commerce example, but at least it's internet-based. And this created a new niche. And the definition of when is something a new niche is a really critical one. It's quite subtle, but he gives a few hints. For example, you got different consumers, different competitors. So for a while, they didn't really have any direct competitors, because if you've ever been in a betting shop in the UK, there used to be people full of very old men smoking roll-ups, and it was kind of a sad place. Whereas online at home, it was a different experience. And they turned out they didn't have any direct competition. So he invested £1 million or $1.5 million. Didn't need to invest anymore. That turned into £100 million because they created a category and then dominated it. And of course, other competitors have come in. And to your point, you're always going to have the culture and the counterculture. But even a so-called duopoly there's normally one person who's winning a lot better than others. For example, with party political systems, without getting, I'm not interested in the allegiance to this, but in the UK system, like the Labour Party is the kind of, the second party in the Tories, I guess, or the Conservative Party, or the sort of party currently of government. But if you actually look at the statistics, Labour Party's been around for about a century. They haven't been in power for a great deal of that. So actually, if you're looking at the monopolistic nature of the UK government, it's mostly Conservative with certain variety of Labour just every so often. So even a duopoly isn't normally an equal thing. So the dynamics of these things are very interesting, but I think the key is just to be creating a new category or breaking off a version such that it could become is a really super powerful thing. And to some extent, I think, Pixie Fair is a really great example of that. It's not a new category, but you dominated it, you've consolidated it, you created a home for those consumers in a way that possibly didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very important point. And so even if I relate that back to a lot of fundamental human or universal understandings, when you just look at life and death, well, life is far more the winning side of this, because we all of our experience is based on life, and death is something that, well, I mean, it happens and it's something that we're aware of, but it certainly doesn't influence us to the same level that life is influencing us, because we're living it in each moment. So I can see that's something that I'm going to want to like think about for hours and hours and hours as I lay awake, unable to fall asleep, is like, how do these different competing sides actually end up holding their own market share of the universe? So that's something I'm just going to take away. And I will say too, just to compare how politics are in Canada, and I don't want to like go down this rabbit hole because we're almost out of time anyways, but just as a statement of fact and observation, is that I believe that Canada is dominantly is a left-leaning country. It's a liberal-minded country, and so I would say that the Liberal Party here is more the dominant party, whereas the Conservative is more like the counter country. And a lot of it just has to do with, I think, the mindset. This is a rather progressive country in a lot of ways. We have a lot of progressive pockets, not throughout the whole country, but when just taking what you're saying and thinking about it myself, is that there is a dominant party here, even if they're not always in power.
Yeah,
Let's get
politics
back
is
to
a
e-commerce,
dirty
man. I hate
game. Yeah, back to
politics.
e-commerce.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
back to the plot. Yeah,
Fair
we're all
enough.
sitting there going, "Oh, politics,
I
scary."
hate politics.
Yeah, it's okay. Fair enough. I just thought it was worth observing. So I will put a pin in that before that thing blows up. So I'm gonna. Here's another one, another tidbit I wanted to share with our audience that you guys talk about on your show. It was the difference between tribe versus community. And I've heard people say to me before, find your tribe, find your tribe. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. What's a tribe exactly, and when is it a tribe and when is it a community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the main takeaway from that whole conversation is to get clear on um, the the opportunity you have to bond with people and your customers, um, and whether or not that is existing with or without you, and how you partner or participate in that situation. And there are a lot of online communities, for example, that have sprung up over the last 30 years for niches or industries or topics. There's a million of them, and that's one thing. And understanding who the community leaders are, and who's sort of thought leaders in the space, and I think that's different than understanding your true fans, or you're like a lot, the famous article about find your 1,000 true fans. And I think it's important to think through the difference between those two things. And if you co-opt a community, and they support you, that's fine. Just realize they can just as quickly disown you, or own someone else as their solution to their problems. And whereas a tribe, or 1,000 true fans, would be people who are passionate about your implementation of the product, or your solution that you're offering. I think there's nuance there between the two. Yeah.
I really love this distinction. Like every time I get on the podcast with Jason, it's one reason I do it is because he comes up with something I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This makes me think, for example, I'm an avid Apple user, but I'm not an Apple fanboy to the extent that I'm going to go and queue up in the rain. There are certain people who will always forever buy Apple products. I am not one of those people. I'm one of those people that's sort of artistic, creative type, and I've got musician friends and photographer friends, which is very useful in e-commerce. And they tend to own Macs, and I guess I've got it for that reason. I mostly got it because I was sick of PC, so it's more a reaction against. It was almost a countercultural thing. I want something that works, but I will throw it out of the window with swearing and get another thing if it keeps to misbehaving. Like my current iMac is not behaving the way it should. The flip side, also to your point there, Jason, that you can disown, a community as distinct from a tribe of fans. I think if you're making that distinction, if I've got it, if the language about right, can not only disown you, but I think that the flip side of love is not disinterest, it's hate. I get passionately angry with stuff that I paid a lot of money and that I have great faith in the brand, and then lets me down. That happens with cars. Like my dad used to own a BMW, which is famously pretty reliable, and these days apparently they break down a lot and they've got electronics. I don't personally know because I don't own a car because I live in central London, but with my Mac is a classic case in point that I get very, very angry to an extent that I didn't with the PC. I got frustrated, but I kind of thought, well, this is a piece of junk. I kind of expect it. So there's also there's another nasty nuance that if you're going to make people passionate about your brand, you better serve them well, particularly if you're premium, because the expectations are really high.
One thing I'd like to add on to that too is that when someone who is that passionate and they enter that mindset where their love has now converted into an equal amount of hate, is for a marketer or just for the business, that is an opportunity to then turn that hate into an even deeper, even more passionate love if you're willing to pull them out of that. So one example for me is when I've been a lifelong Nintendo fan, and I the previous console generation, there was this tablet that would plug into the device, and I didn't use it all that much. And then I tried charging it in, and then all of a sudden it just bricked. And so I called the Nintendo and says, "Listen, guys, I barely use this," and all of a sudden it bricks. And they says, "Yeah, you are like a few days past the warranty." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, now I'm getting really ticked off here." But I explained to them, I came from a place of, I've been a fan my whole life. I've always loved Nintendo, and I just this and they can tell that I'm honest in my inflection. I say, okay, just mail it in, and we'll fix that right up. And then another time, I dropped one of my devices. It smashed, and they had shipped me a new one afterwards, basically at cost. So I didn't have to buy like a whole brand new one. So like there was a moment where I was going to be really, really, really disgruntled, and I was going to express that, and it was going to cause. And I think they understand that. They understand that when people are passionate and they have access to social media. I, all 15 followers on my personal YouTube channel, we're gonna hear about this. That can cause a lot of damage. So we understand that. Okay, here's a market opportunity. Let's see if we can um, pull them out of that dark moment and get them into an even brighter spot than they were before.
It's absolutely true. And the classic case on Amazon, which is kind of so primitive and obvious that it shouldn't need saying, but people still need to hear it sometimes, it seems, is very simply that if somebody gives you a 1-star review, and of course, Amazon makes it incredibly difficult to find who it is, but if you can do that through various means of diligence, then and turn it around, give them a new product, refund, be profoundly apologetic, and even send them a card in the post to say that, then you often will get it turned into a 5-star review. But even if you don't, and this is the thing that we need to just be broader minded about, the word of mouth, I swear that they'll be talking about it to somebody if you give them an exceptional experience, even if they don't bother to get down to updating your listing. Now, of course, they've dinged your conversion rate, which makes the economics of that product worse. So it matters. But still, we got to do everything we can. We got to really stand behind that promise that we made to a community. And I think to your point, Jason, that I think in the end, and this sort of ties in with what we were saying about somebody finding something that matters to them. I think we've got to do stuff that matters to us. I think if you don't do that, in the end, with a sort of millennial-driven consumer base now, now that they're outnumbering the baby boomers, and by definition will do more over the years to come, we can't afford to be anything less than engaged, because it's kind of almost dangerous to be half-hearted now.
Well, yeah. Speaking as the millennial out of the three of us, I yeah, I can definitely attest to, if I were unhappy, I would have, I think, 7 or 8 different channels, both on social media, different WhatsApp groups. Call my mom. There's a lot of things that I can do to cause damage. Yeah. All right, gents. So I got one more question that I want to ask you, and then I'll let you both go. And this one is a thread that I have been working on in a lot of the conversations that I've been having with people. So it's not specifically to do with content that I picked up from you guys. It's just more of like something that I want to get your take on. And it has to do, and actually it ties into a lot of what we've just been talking about. So one of, I guess, the promotional terms, one of the things you hear about in the e-commerce space is, be your own boss. Or, don't, get, if they want to be cynical about it, they say fire your boss. I'm like, okay, you don't have to go that far. But here's where I've had an issue with it, which is that I think as long as we are in the interest of trying to make money, someone is our boss. And sometimes it's just one person that is paying us. Sometimes it's like when I was freelancing, it was like several bosses. So that one pressure from one person is now disseminated across 7 people, or how many clients I had at the time. But when we're running a store, we still have bosses. We just have thousands and not tens of thousands and not hundreds of thousands of them. So now the pressure from one person is now spread out over many, 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 many people. And what I just wanted to hear your take on that is like, where is my logic maybe not quite chalking up, or do you agree? Do you disagree? Overall, the fundamental point is we're always working for somebody, regardless if it's one person or 1,000.
Yeah. You want to go first, Michael? You want me to? Yeah. Well, I was my olden days, when I was a 9-to-5 guy, I was a human resources guy for half my career. And then, and then ultimately I was in charge of all human resources. And so I do take your point about the customer, in essence, being a form of boss, but there's, parsing it out a bit. What a boss literally has is hire, fire authority over you. And customers do not have that. So, there is a difference now. I went full time with our business on January 1st, 2014. And it was the day I ended my, 9-to-5 career, but now I work 24/7, 365 on a whole bunch of projects all the time. And although technically I don't have a boss, I'm in a 50-50 partnership with my wife, really in support of her business. And so There's this funny sign I saw one time on the show Gold Rush Alaska, and it was over this guy's desk. Tony Beats is the guy; he's a real character. And the sign over it said, "I'm the CEO because she said I could be." And so that's sort of a fun jab at just the reality that we do all have bosses to some degree, but when you are the CEO of your own company or owner of your own company, you really have removed a lot of the controls over just the top level choices that can or can't be made. Uh, and so there's huge, you know, comfort in that. If you can make it work on your own, I think you realize over time, wow, I've liberated myself from having that type of control or pressure on my life. And that's why people go into business frequently, and it's a incredibly valuable part of being a business owner is the sense of control. Yeah.
So I've got to take on this as well. I mean, we're always working for somebody was your kind of discuss point, and like the British essay style would be, and then, we're always working for somebody to discuss. First thing, be your own boss. In my case, that's a mixed blessing because I'm often working for an idiot who is very ambitious indeed for his workers, i.e. me and my, VAs in the Philippines, who sets ridiculous workloads. My workload for a day normally is actually a pretty full week. And I know this of myself, and I try to back off it. So working for yourself is a mixed blessing depending who you are and how good you are at project management and people management, right?
You're a bad boss to yourself.
I'm a bad boss to myself, yeah. When I'm within a sort of structure of a company or an organization, then that's mitigated by other people saying, Mike, we're not going to actually achieve, this project in a week. It's going to be 10 weeks. And I go, oh, yeah, okay. So I think the first thing is if you're your own boss, you need to get two things, I think, to counterbalance that insanity that can descend for the very ambitious person, which I certainly would count myself as. Number one, get a coach because you need some outside head, particularly if you don't have a business partner. And number two, get into a mastermind of your peers because they'll be going through the same stuff and they could give a bit of reaction to when you propose something and everyone goes, dude, that's never going to happen that time. Sorry. Then maybe they're right. So that's the first reflection. The second one, though, maybe to make it to think about the orientation to it in a bit more of a generous mindset. The whole idea of not working for somebody as a desirable concept is an interesting one. So it reminds me of the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People continuum. He talks about dependence, independence, interdependence. For me, this really ties in with the things you've just referenced. So dependence, being an employee. If your boss dislikes you, they fire you. You're dependent on their opinion, and that leads to certain behaviors, some not so good. The second one is independence, the freelancer mentality, which was kind of, I'm still trying to wean myself off. And my wife has that. So we're freelance musicians in London. Independence is so important to those people. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about this in his little diagram, doesn't he? The quadrant. And then interdependence is more of a feeling of like we depend on other people. I can't make anything happen without guys in China, without people who are doing photography, without Amazon fulfilling stuff for me. I don't even want to be the guy fulfilling stuff. Why would I want to be, a solopreneur in the end? That's a miserable existence. So that changes. Maybe I would just wanted to come to the end and say, we could change the language and saying, instead of saying we're always working for somebody, you could say we're always serving someone. We could be serving them unwillingly if they're telling us to do stuff we don't want to do. And do I want to get up in the middle of the night and deal with some crisis? Not really. But is it important? Is it part of my service to people? Well, okay, if I see it that way, it's a different mentality, it's a different feel of it. And I think that in the end, we have to be humble enough to say, well, we're kind of going to get paid for serving people, but we should have the mentality of serving without getting paid anyway. The point of, I forget who it is who said it, but the idea of being the, sort of the person who takes care of the clients or the consumers before they spend any money with us, that we have that mentality. And if we can try and develop that, I think it changes things, less of a burden.
I think your point about interdependence is one major takeaway for sure, is that no one is going to survive, thrive, or flourish in business without other people. The idea that like a lot of my ability to succeed with my own store is dependent on a country very, very, very far away from here is one thing that, I mean, it's been true all this time. And yet this is really probably the first time that has really sunk in. So that to me is like my major takeaway. And with that, I'm going to let both of you, I almost don't want to let you guys go, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to. So Let the audience know how they can check out your content, and if they want to reach out to either of you individually or as a collective, or however you two prefer to do this, by all means, let us know.
Yeah, the simplest thing to do is the ecommerceleader.com is the website for our podcast, which is called the E-commerce Leader. And happy to have people check it out. It's an honor to be, in conversation with Michael. And we do a conversational podcast on topics. We don't do interviews, I guess. So that's just sort of a different style of podcast. And we have a great time with it. We try to do deep dive. We're currently running down that track, as we talked about, of e-commerce first principles. But we've got a couple years track record now of putting out a lot of great content, and so people could check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Jason's point, we can be found on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And what's nice is that I get feedback from some really bright guys who are listening and enjoy the content. So it's not a huge audience, but I think the quality of the ones that I stumble across is really good. So we're reaching the people that I guess we intended to reach with the kind of message we wanted to get out there. I guess the other thing to say about it is we tend to dwell on and start from sort of 50,000 foot view concepts rather than being very tactical oriented, because there's so much of that out there that I guess we didn't feel we needed to add that. So the sort of just topics we talked about today is kind of quite typical of the sort of thing you would get if you listened as well. In terms of getting hold of me, I guess we ought to also mention that we do work separately as consultants. So for me, the best thing I offer at the moment is probably the AmazonMastermind.com, which is a small group intensive work with 6 and 7 figure Amazon sellers, many of whom also developing their own Shopify stores as well. And that's been very successful about 3.5 years. So that's the thing to check out for people at that stage. Jason, do you want to tee up winning on Shopify?
Winningonshopify.com is our coaching site. And for blogging, I have a business partner, Kyle Hamer, and he focuses on Amazon sellers, and I focus on Shopify sellers. And together we do our coaching. Yeah, it's a fun job.
Well, I enjoyed listening to your podcast. I myself, as I've established numerous times, is I'm a big fan of fundamentals. I think it's really important to get the fundamentals right before you move into the tactics and move into the strategy, because you can learn the strategy, but if you don't know why they work, then it's just not gonna matter. So with that, thank you to both of you for being here. This has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate both your time.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Excellent. All right, listeners, I think you all know what to do. And if you don't, go and listen to many, many more episodes, both for myself and our guests here, and as well as all of the guests. Everybody has something important to say, and I think each and every one contributes a really important piece of the puzzle. So go off and put your puzzle together. Take care.
Basically sell the trend as a way for people to find and sell better products online.
Hey, this is Joseph from Ecomonics. Just wanted to thank you for being here and for giving this content your time and attention. I hope you learned something. I can say with certainty, I have learned something with every episode that I have done, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. There's a couple of things you can do to help us out. If you want to check out the audio content, we are available on all major podcast platform distributors. And while you're there, give us a 5-star review. It helps a lot. And while you're here on YouTube, there's a lot of things you can do to help out as well. It's not going to take very long. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button for this episode, and hit the notification bell so when we have new content for you, it's going to be at your doorstep ASAP. Lastly, this podcast is created by Debutify, the best Shopify template available. It is 100% free for you to start, and it can change your life. It can make you so much more free than you are right now. So if this episode wasn't enough to convince you, I think a few more might do the trick. So have at it.